have something that is perfect, you can't do away with it and you cannot change it. So that was not an option. So he and his son decided that the Son, who is equal with God, and if you read through Genesis there, the Hebrew points out very clearly that Christ is God. There's three of them, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. While we do not understand their nature completely, we do know that the Hebrew terms used to represent these beings involved in creation is plural. Okay, now then, he sent his Son down here to live a perfect life and then to die a very humiliating death. Now you recall when Nixon was caught doing some things that he resigned, and they said since he experienced such a humiliation and loss that was punishment enough. Okay, so anyway, we could say, well, Christ didn't do it just right and all of this, but he did, and God accepted it. And God does not cut corners, nor fudge, nor cheat. He does not have to. So Christ's sacrifice was exactly what was required to redeem every man, woman, and child that has ever lived on planet Earth. And I believe that when we are born, or when we first become a viable creature in the womb, our names are put in the book of life, and only we can take it out by our behavior. Okay? Now then, God did this for us. And folks, it was here that he did this, on this mountain. Abraham offered Isaac on Mount Moriah. The temple was here on Mount Moriah. And Christ gave his life here on Mount Moriah. Now, one day, I was walking along this escarpment with an archaeologist friend of mine. And those of you that know me, I am not given to salubrious soliloquies or sepulchral solicitudes. You know, I am hard-headed, hard-nosed, and I want to know the facts. And that's all I want to know. But as I was walking by, my left arm pointed to a dump under the wall or the escarpment, and my mouth said, that's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant is in there. Well, I love the Israelis, but they're not overly generous, and I think our friend here will agree. But this man said, that's wonderful. We will let you excavate. We will give you a place to stay. We will give you all the help you need. We will provide your food, and we will do your laundry. How many times does an Israeli offer that to a goyim? Not often. So anyway, I was flabbergasted. I had not even thought about the Ark of the Covenant or Jeremiah's cave or none of that stuff, okay? So anyway, I said, later I will maybe do this, but now I've got to go home. So I went home and I dug through history books and all of this. I found out that this city, at the time of the vanishing of the Ark of the Covenant and the other major furnishings of the first temple, when they vanished, the city was surrounded by a siege wall. 2 Kings, 25th chapter, Nebuchadnezzar cast forts against the city round about. And the Hebrew simply means a siege wall. Titus did the same thing. Part of Titus's wall has survived to the north. They were built out of range of the catapults in the city. Catapult ology had not advanced since Nebuchadnezzar's time. And the Roman catapults, or that period of time, they had about the same range as the one in Nebuchadnezzar's time. So we can conclude that Nebuchadnezzar's wall was about where Titus's was. Now then, the Ark of the Covenant vanished out of this besieged city. Some people say it was taken to Mount Horeb. Some people say that Solomon's son, by the Queen of Sheba, snookered him into making a replica, and he traded. But the Shekinah glory didn't leave until about 586 BC. This man might have snookered Solomon and everybody else around, but he could not snooker the Shekinah glory. So that did not happen. Now then, the only place short of God blinding part of the Babylonian army and having his people, some of his people, take this out and hide it, was that it had to be hidden in the city or inside this siege wall. Okay? Now then, the city is being systematically excavated down underneath the tunnels, the caves, and everything with very scientific methods. Now then, I went to the Israeli archaeological authorities, including the gentleman I was speaking with. When my mouth said something my brain, shall we say, didn't go along with or had no idea about, and I explained how it had to be in one of these inside that siege wall, and I thought that it was there from my research. So they gave me a permit based on that. And we started digging. And as we dug, we found cutouts in the cliff face where 3 public signs related to the crucifixion were set up when a well-known criminal was to be crucified. Now, this arrangement I always thought was just for Christ. It was not. This is how the Romans did it. And they had captured Barabbas, who had stirred up a lot of trouble in the area, rebelled and all of, tried to overthrow the government. He didn't have a lot of luck, but he tried it. And so he was sentenced to be crucified, and he was to be crucified in a very public manner. Now, some say on a hill far away. This is a hill far away. It's a little bit below the crest because they made a quarry through here. But it's still on Mount Moriah. Now then, they always crucified people right along with the side of a very busy road where the most people would see the crucified, because it was meant to intimidate anybody that would be thinking about trying something. And they put the language or the name of the person and what they were accused of in the chief local languages. In Jerusalem, it was Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, or Roman. And there's 3 cutouts there. Now then, in other cities, they put up whatever languages were used there, but it was always Roman was one of those languages. Now then, as we excavated down the escarpment, found these cutouts. The wall that was on the outside away from the cliff face got so high and teetery that we decided to sink a shaft down to see what strata we would find. We did this, and we turned the samples in appropriately. We did carbon-14 dating on the charred wood that we found at different levels. We turned in the mortars and pestles, and the last one I handed in, they said this is 10,000 years old. Jebusite, of course. But anyway, when we got down to the bottom, we came back up to where this thing, the ledge of the cliff, it had been cut down into. Anyway, the Roman level was at the top of this thing, and everything below that was pre-Roman. So we went along in a horizontal shaft along the cliff face, carefully documenting everything as we went. Any archaeologist that doesn't do this is a criminal, because people deserve to know what happened here and what was found. Not some made-up story, Not some things that were carried in from another dig and put here so they can say, well, we found this here, this proves such and such. There's a lot of that goes on. And in school, they teach you, you do not go out and dig to see what is there. You decide what is there, and then you see to it that that's what you find. See, this is what they teach you in school. So anyway, we went along this wall at the Roman level. We found Roman coins, we found Roman glass, we found Roman pottery, all this stuff. We turned all of this in. It's in boxes over in the basement, our storage area at the Rockefeller Museum. Unless somebody came along and decided it wasn't any good and they had too much of that sort of thing anyway. Now then, as we went along, I found this cutout rock. And I thought, man, that's unusual. So I picked the thing up and I noticed that there was a depression under there. So I started digging carefully down through there, and it was just some debris. But it was a cross hole filled with debris. And apparently, when these cross holes were not in use for crucifixion, they had plugs that they put in them so horses or people walking by wouldn't break a leg, and so they wouldn't fill up, and they'd have to clean them out every time they were going to use them. So anyway, I was told to put that in a safe place, which I did, and it's still in a safe place. But anyway, it dawned upon me that this had to be where Christ was crucified, because this was 12 feet below these cutouts in the cliff face, and it was at the Roman level, because we found coins of Tiberius and some others. We know that that was open to the public for several years, including the point in time when Christ was crucified. Now then, as we were working there, we noticed a crack in the cliff right by the left side of where this cross hole was. Well, that didn't mean a lot, because this thing has been fractured considerably, and if you'll look along this escarpment, there's a lot of cracks in there. And the Bible says that when Christ died, there was an earthquake and the rocks were rent. Okay? Now then, today I know that that crack occurred at that moment in time. Then I didn't know that. What was I excavating for? What was I looking for? What was my permit about? It was to see if the Ark of the Covenant had been hidden in this escarpment. And I had people that I had to report to periodically. Now then, I was running out of money, and it was time to go home, and I prayed, Lord, what shall I do? And I was impressed to break right through the cliff face. And that seemed very ignorant to me. So I kept looking around, and I found some very old buildings, old foundations, old altar stones, which I left in place, as any good archaeologist will do. And when we got ready to go, the day before we were to fly out, my oldest son, it was his turn down in the hole, and we were passing our tools out to store them. And he said, Dad, you always pray about things. Why haven't you prayed about this so you'll know where to dig? And I said, I have. And he says, well, what happened? And I said, I was impressed to break through this wall. Like, you know, that settles that. He said, well, why don't you do it? You've done dumber things than that before. So I said, well, okay. So I had him holler up at my youngest son, pass the tools back down. So anyway, here this crack was in the cliff face that went right by the left side of the wall. I decided if I had made my chisel crack over here, that I could just pop this out. See, and I'd have a nice piece that I could put back and wouldn't damage anything. And so we did this, and we popped this out. And way back in the little, back into that crack was a dark hole about like this. Well, I said, give me the flashlight. So I shined it back in there, and here was this cave chamber. Well, I thought the Ark of the Covenant has got to be sitting right back there, and I went off into Never Never Land. I mean, goosebumps, swimmy head, and the whole bit. So we quickly enlarged the hole and got in. Well, the Ark of the Covenant wasn't sitting there. So I worked and worked and poked around in this little hole and that little hole and followed this erosion path through the limestone. Finally, the 6th of January, 1982, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, something else the archaeologist always does. When you enter a chamber where you think something might be, you look at your watch and you make a note of that. It may be important. If you don't find anything in there, you can forget about it. But you should look in case. So I did that. I went in there. Nothing but rocks. Now then, ordinarily I would have crawled right back out of that place, but my sons had gotten double pneumonia, walking pneumonia. They were running fevers of about 104. So was I. But anyway, I sent them home, and I decided that I was either going to find that this trip or die in the hole. I really did. That's not very bright, but when you're sick enough, it seemed very logical to me. And so anyway, I got this little Arab guy. He was just about so big, and he was marvelous at getting into places and shining the light around so I could see if they were empty or if they had anything in there. And so we went along like this, and we came to a little hole where the water had eroded a bit through there, and there was a stalactite hanging right down over the hole. So I took my hammer and I carefully tapped it at the base and laid it aside so we would have that for future reference if necessary. And then I made the hole big enough for him to get in. And this is the way we had been working. So he crawls in there, and I start to hand the light back in there to him. Here he came out terrified, absolutely terrified. And if I hadn't got out of his way, I honestly believe he would have taken me apart getting out. He was mindless terror. That made me suspect there was something special in there. So he said, "What's in there? What's in there? I'm not going back in there." Well, that was fine by me, but I made the hole big enough so I could get in there, and that is the only reason that I looked in that cave, because it looked very unpromising. So I crawled around on these rocks. The place was full of them, about 18 inches of clearance to the ceiling. And I shined my light down through the little openings down through the rocks. I saw a spot of gold here, and I saw a spot of gold there, and I saw a spot of gold there, and my heart started pounding like you wouldn't believe. And I started taking these rocks and sticking them here, there, and everywhere. I actually ended up with rocks behind my shoulders back here. And here was a gold veneered table. I thought, that's the table of showbread. Later, I found out by reading the book of Samuel a little more carefully that Solomon made 10 more of them, besides the one that Moses had Bezalel make out in the wilderness. So now I don't know if that was a copy or the real thing. At that point in time, we didn't know that. Well, I happened to notice this stone box right in front of me, and the lid cracked right here. Well, I thought there's got to be something special in this box. And so I kind of looked up to see what I could do to get rid of some more rocks, and I saw some brown, dark brown stuff. And I looked on up the wall, and here it had come through a crack. And down the wall, and on that broken area of that lid. Suddenly, it all came together. The cutouts, the cross hole, the crack, the Ark of the Covenant, and Christ's blood on the mercy seat. 45 minutes later, I came to enough that I carefully put everything back, crawled out of there, sealed up the hole. Now, I can't get anything out of there but small objects, okay? But we have been cutting a large shaft down that's big enough to bring these things out. What they had done was to carry this stuff in there, lay animal skins over it, and then wood over that, and then fill it full of stone. Why they did that, I do not know. I can understand the animal skins, I can understand the wood, but why the stones? So anyway, the significance of that is this. In Psalm 77:13 it says, "Thy way, O God, is in the sanctuary." Now see, God doesn't just say things to fill up a book. We might, if we're writing a book, say a few things just to fill up a page or another paragraph. He does not. His way is in the sanctuary. On the Day of Atonement, when the goat that represented Christ as the sin bearer, all of the sins that had accumulated in the sanctuary for that entire year were figuratively transferred to its head by the high priest. That animal was killed, its blood was taken into the most holy place and sprinkled on the mercy seat. The thought had never entered my mind, people. But when I saw that, I knew it could be no other way but that Christ's blood had to go on that mercy seat. So type met antitype, and it's not that many feet from where you're sitting today.